This is The Resilient Life, where we believe that every human will struggle in this life. Our challenge is to struggle well. I'm Ryan Mannion. I lost my brother to war, my mom to cancer, and I'm the daughter of a retired Marine. I'm also a wife, mom, author, and president of one of the nation's leading veteran service organizations. Join me and some incredible guests as we explore the value of struggling well through life's inevitable challenges. All right. Welcome to another episode of the Resilient Life podcast. Really excited to have our guest on today, Zachary Bell, AKA Veteran with a Sign. Welcome to the Resilient Life.
I'm super excited to be here. I can't thank you enough. I'm so sorry I bothered you so much, but I hope it's worth it.
No, I'm excited. It was funny. My assistant was emailing back and forth with me, and she said, I'm not sure how to reply because I said Zachary Bell is going to come on the podcast. There's the email. And she said, he signs his name Veteran with a Sign. She said, so I don't know if I should write him back and say, Dear Mr. Veteran with a Sign. And we went back and forth. And just a little funny banter as
No. So I had to establish a Gmail initially. And so my email is Veteran with a Sign at Gmail. No, it doesn't matter if anybody knows that. But in the signature, it's really just because of like in all social media stuff, it says like your name.
Yeah.
And like I view it all as like not me, just like a version of me, or like it's a character really. And so I'm always like this guy, he would refer to himself as warfighter is like how I see that version of me, is like always talking in third person, being like very respectfully warfighter, like so it just, maybe it is me. Maybe this is the moment I realize it. I don't know, but I hope it's not.
Well, let's talk about, so, you started Veteran with a Sign because of course you are a Marine Corps veteran, and it was your experiences there that, you got out in 2011,
yes,
but didn't start Veteran with a Sign until 2020. And I think there was a lot of creative juices flowing during COVID. I started the Resilient Life podcast during COVID, and it was kind of, I felt like COVID was this time where all these things that you kind of had like thought of, these little ideas in your head, all of a sudden you had this time that had been almost granted to you where you were like, hey, now maybe I can try this. I don't know if it was the same for you, but I know for me, I had had real conversations about starting this podcast, and really just got back down to like, I just don't have the bandwidth. It's not possible. And I don't know if it would have been possible had COVID not happened, because there's a lot of stuff you have to do to build up to actually getting it off the ground. But I find it interesting, all these people that started these projects during COVID and have kind of almost found new identity in that respect. And was it like that for you?
So first off, I can tell why you're successful at this, because I wish I could have come up with such an articulate way of describing my experience. But I mean, I got out in 2011, and like 2 weeks later I had a job. So from there, and I'm sure we'll get into it, I went from job, nonprofit, full-time school, full-time work, bachelor's, master. And it wasn't until COVID happened and I wasn't trapped. I was able to stay at home with my wife and kids for like at least 90 days. I feel like it was consecutive. I mean, I left like to go get like toilet paper and random things, but like the family unit really didn't divide until March, April, May. Yeah, about May. And I had all these like not dumb ideas. I had creative ideas, things I wanted to do. But for me, and I know the pandemic was hard, and I would never minimize that, but I'm not going to minimize my experience in it. I had really just an incredible time with my family, like bar none. And I'll never shy away from that. I've thought about honestly, like being like, there were aspects of it that were, immeasurable, and how complicated they were. I mean, I also got sick. I even got hospitalized that time for like something that happened. It was fine. I have a sensitivity to ibuprofen, and so it messed me up, put me in the hospital for like a week. But like even with all that happened, the greatest thing that happened was like I got to spend more time with my wife and kids than I ever had before, like to this day. And it really broke the framework of my thinking of like so much of my life had been focused on getting the thing to get the stuff for them or for us as our family. But when I shifted my focus to like, this is just the family, everything else came in to give me more of that stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Right.
I feel the same way. I look back on like, again, with you, like kind of those first 90 days where it, you didn't really know what was happening and you were in this like insular bubble with your family. And
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden it was just like everything slowed down. You know,
Mm-hmm.
my kids are in a ton of sports, you know, everything just stopped. And
Mm-hmm.
just having that time to, you know, I mean, we did paint by numbers and we,
Yeah.
you know, we made homemade empanadas and, you know, we'll probably never do that again. We did like family dinners at the dining room table and just anything to try and, you know, bring some levity to the situation.
Mm-hmm.
But again, not minimizing what some people had to go through, like having that precious time that with in fleeting time with your kids. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
I look back on it quite fondly.
Yeah. It
Have,
was, I mean, it was great.
yeah.
It was great. And I think it just broke all the ideas I had about stuff and like reaffirmed or strengthened thoughts I had on other things. Like we made a fort downstairs for like a month. It was about a month straight. Like I hung up some tarps, and it was definitely a month because I had to make a path, like for us to like walk around in like the living room. But like I mean, they were in sixth and fourth grade, and it was incredible. Like it was just absolutely incredible. It in some ways I've looked at it recently as like a time that shifted my life moving forward. Um, you know, was when I was in middle school was when 9/11 happened. It's kind of like that same thing with them of like there's this moment with my children. It's really crazy to see that like in during their what I've come to realize now is like middle schools, at least in my opinion, are really your most formative years
Mhm.
because it like decides if you're going to be like that movie The Outsiders, like a greaser or a sock or whatever. And like if you're gonna be like a good kid, bad kid, or whatever, like middle
Yeah.
school seems to be like where you start that path. In
Yep.
high school, you just kind of like dig in. Um, but with them, it was just like, hey, what do you want to do? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? Do you want to cook? You want to whatever? And so that was in my office. I was just upstairs, just being like on the internet, being like, none of this stuff's kind of funny, and like, I don't know, what if I just like made fun of myself a little bit? And so that was the impetus, I guess you'd say.
So, so what was, well, let's backtrack for
Mm-hmm.
everybody's sake. Okay. So you serve in the Marine Corps from 2007 to 2011. You go right into
Yes.
a job. So you're not one of the veterans that has a terrible
Mm-hmm.
time transitioning. Um,
Oh no, I didn't. Yeah,
okay. Well, when I say
yeah.
transitioning, I mean
Mm-hmm.
from an employment perspective. Like you fell right into that job. You were not in a place where you were struggling to find a job. You had the job. You go to school, and then you start losing your friends that you served with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I got out, there was a flood in Nashville in 2010. Like literally got pictures sent to me in Afghanistan, like all of Nashville flooded, and so uh, part of the effects of that were Nashville during the recession in like 2011, 12, 13. There was a flood. There was an equal amount of cash that flooded into the economy that provided a lot of opportunities for people. In particular, my father-in-law, who's a general general contractor,
Yeah.
so he had stuff, and so I was like, "Hey, let me work for you," and that's what I did until I was able to get a job at a hospital where I worked um, night shift. And so for the first 2 years, I went to college during the day, 8 to 11, slept in my car. And then I would go to work from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Then I would go to sleep on a Tuesday and then start that over on a Wednesday and Friday and like so forth and so on. I did that for 3 years. So like
While married and with
um, while married and with two children. Yeah. And I had terminal leave, which is like accumulate a massive amount of leave in the military. And you tack it on to like the
Yep.
end or like all at once. But I mean, my main thing, my transition really hasn't started happening until like now recently, or until I graduated grad school, honestly, because like I literally didn't have any runway, right? A lot of people, they come home, they do things, or they're like, hey, I'll do this, I'll do that. And like me, it was just like these kids, they've really got to be fed. Yeah. Um, and my wife has to be, provided for. Like she's taking care of the children. I got to do my side of like, whatever I can to support this family. And so, and I've always kind of felt like since even when I decided to make the change in my life of leaving the military, it wasn't until like I had this goal of like going to college, get my bachelor's, get my master's. And then when I got my master's, I like looked up and I had no more goals, like zap. And I was like, oh, okay. And the whole time I was doing that, started losing friends. Boom, 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 boom. Started checking out just the whole time, and I was like doing stuff to help veterans, working in nonprofit healthcare, working in for-profit healthcare, doing all these things. But in late 2016, it all like kind of hit me head on of like, oh, I can't keep running from this. This is here. And the thing that had been distracting me was like, if I get to this step, if I, accumulate that thing, or if I achieve that goal, then I'll be able to like focus more on me and focus more on my community. But like, it was just piling up on me.
It's so interesting when you say like I had these goals, right? So I got
Yes.
my bachelor's and I got my master's, and then I didn't have any more goals.
That was it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was it. That was forever. Like in my family, especially growing up in where I grew up, there's not a lot of opportunities available. Like people say things to you like real redneck stuff, and I can say that because I'm a redneck. My father's preferred name was Bubba, like his father before him. I remember once he even tried to sign a check. This is back in the olden days for anybody listening. He tried to sign a check Bubba at a Piggly Wiggly. And they're like, you can't, they like, you can't do that. Yeah. You have to write your name. And I didn't know his name was John until that moment because I was a child. Yeah. Because everybody called him Bubba. But no, they really, a real emphasis on like labor, mainly because there's a direct correlation into your ability to do something and get rewarded for it in payment. So like this idea that you go to college as an investment into your career and stuff, it's just nothing that had permeated like the world I lived in particular. So, I wanted to go to college, and I was the first person in my family to do that. And then, I got my bachelor's, and I got my, I'm pretty sure I remember telling, if I were to tell my grandmother I got an MBA, she would ask me what team I played for. So like, I'd be like, the Grizzlies. Like, she just wouldn't get it. So it's, and that's a real hard cycle to break too, if I'm being completely honest. Yeah. So like joining the military, doing all these things and stuff, I wanted to like change the trajectory of my family's life. And so when I did all of it, I was just like, I remember feeling like this, like, what do I do now? Like, I don't feel good. I thought I would feel good. Like, I mean, or I thought I would, and I'm 35 now, like as of a week ago. And I thought I would have like this feeling of like, this is adulthood, or like, this is the moment, and it continues to elude me. Which I don't know if that's good or bad, but I'm trying to make sense. Is this making sense?
I think it's a good thing. I mean, I'm a few years older than you, and I don't feel like
I doubt that.
I don't feel like I'm a grown up yet either. And but I think that there's that idea that we're continuously growing and evolving. And one of the things that I find even through my work at the Travis Manion Foundation is this idea of fulfillment by achieving goals. And a lot of times I don't think, I think the story is interesting, but I don't think it's unique to the veteran community, right? I think that you probably fall into the majority of veterans, because if you look at your story by nature, Marine veteran, got out in 2011, fell right into a job, went and got his bachelor's, went and got his master's. You put your story on paper and you're going to say, well, we're going to put this guy in the box of doing good, right? Not having any
Mm-hmm.
issues. And I
Mm-hmm.
constantly find that especially with the veterans that are part of our community is they have similar stories to yours.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I always talk our COO, and I'll share this story because he shares it very frequently, so I know he's okay with it. But our COO is a Marine Corps veteran, graduated from the Naval Academy a few years ahead of my brother, and he was this ridiculously engaged volunteer with the Travis Manning Foundation, like one of our key volunteers, working with kids all the time while he was still active duty. He was teaching at the Naval Academy, and he's getting out of the Marine Corps. And I'm like, this is a guy I want working with me. And so I call him and I'm like, Josh, why don't you come work with the Travis Manning Foundation? And he's like, oh, what does the pay look like? And I tell him the pay, and he says, well, I love volunteering with we're nonprofit, and we can't compete with, corporate salaries. But he says, listen, I've been in the Marine Corps for 11 years. I've put my wife and my 2 daughters, just like you, I've put them through a lot. I got to go make money now. And so like, I want to take care. And he said, my 10-year plan is he got a big job consulting. And he said, my 10-year plan is to make a lot of money. And in 10 years, I'll come back and I'll work with the Travis Manning Foundation. And, but I'll still continue to volunteer. And I said, okay, sounds good. Right. So he leaves the Marine Corps, and he kind of falls off. He falls off as a volunteer with the Travis Manning Foundation. And I talk to him every now and again, and he's just like, listen, life is so busy. I've got so much going on. And, financially, he's doing tremendous. He's killing it.
Yeah.
But he takes away that piece. Number one, he's taking off the uniform. So he loses all of that. He loses that identity. But then he takes off the uniform of continuing service through the Travis Manning Foundation and doesn't recognize at all. He starts to go down a pretty bad path where, he's drinking a little too much. He's blaming his wife. He's saying like, I'm thinking like, well, maybe my wife's the problem. He's starting to have like some marital issues. And then he finally realizes that complete sense of purpose. And again, not to sound cliche, but that idea of being a part of something bigger than yourself, right? It's just gone. And he doesn't have the time to replace it with what he's doing currently. And he's just lost. And he's like, I was in the worst place. And he said, and when people used to talk about like, oh, the transition is tough, he's like, I laughed because I had my job before I even got out of the Marine Corps. And
yeah, sounds like an officer. Yeah. Yeah.
And he said, I had no issues. 9 months after he left the Marine Corps and took this huge job, he called me and he said, does that offer still stand? And I said, the offer still stands, but the salary is still the same. And he left that job. He's been with the foundation for many, many years now. He's never looked back. And he said, I have found like that purpose and passion again. And I realize it's not tied to a paycheck. But, I guess I think what I'm trying to say is like, I think there's a lot of veterans are missing that something and they don't quite know what it is. Right. Even as they're achieving all of these different things, like there's something missing. And my shameless plug that, that's what we exist for at the Travis Manning Foundation. Like that is what we do. We give them that opportunity.
Well, and I couldn't say it better myself, so I dare not try. But I've always found that I find the best versions of myself in the service of others.
Yeah.
And speaking of someone who's been in corporate America for like over a decade, I can wholeheartedly 100% say without question that it sucks. And it just does. Like it's especially if you're in the military or if you're connected to it, or like you see people that like, a military unit in particular has like a cohesive ability and connectivity that's not found outside of it, because like it's not just the service members, it's the families too. Like, my kids refer to my friends as uncles, my wife refers to them as brothers, like, as you know. Um, and so then you go to like a corporate place and it's just not the same. It's just not the same. And so much of, in my experience, I found so much of your job in corporate America is looking for like your next job or your promotion. And like you're literally never staying in a place because of like different rules. Like companies have usually written into their bylaws, if you get promoted, you can only make 10% more of your salary based on blah, 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 blah. So you have to leave to get more money. And so like, you're like literally like basically like running for office in some ways. Like every 2 years, you got to be like advocating for yourself somewhere else. And it was just a grind. It is a grind. And COVID has really changed a lot of people's perceptions on those things too. And I'm grateful for it. Like it really, I was not unaware of the grind. I was justifying the time for the money and things that I was getting to provide the life for my family. But I mean, just the second I was like, that's not worth it.
Yeah.
If I just focus on doing this as much as I possibly can, being with them, spending time with them, caring, like, what are they doing? How can I help them? And stuff like that. The second I did that, everything else went up. My happiness went up. My connections with them went up. My relationships went up. Like everything else got better.
Yeah.
And it's put me in this space now to where like, I don't say anything stupid like I broke the matrix, but like I just don't think I'll ever go back. No, I know I won't go back. Like there is no like once you're like, oh, I don't want to do that anymore. Does that make sense? Right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
I think, let's talk a little bit about, I shared, that you were losing your friends, but
Mm-hmm.
got to a point as the years went by outside of your
Mm-hmm.
military service that you had lost more of your friends to suicide
Mm-hmm.
than you
Yes.
had while serving.
Yes. I don't know the exact number. I used to. I can't find it. But a friend of mine who is a reporter for the New York Times, we served together. His name's T.M. Gibbons Smith. Shameless plug. But I think it was in 2020, maybe 2021. He reached out and was like, "Hey, how many people do you know from our unit that have like gone?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "Here's what I have." And I just like looked at it and I was just like, "That's more than I thought." And because he'd been trying to like put together like basically a cohesive list, and my heart really goes out to him for doing that in the first place. But I started to notice that, in my opinion, the thing that we all had most in common is that we weren't as honest as we should have been about the reality of our situations. Like, going through all of the stuff I was going through, I wasn't happy, or I wasn't at peace. And things had come up and down in my life and would affect me. And then like slowly but surely, like it just started to happen to where like tick, tick, tick. My first friend who took his life was in November 2011. I just started going to school then. And that happened. And I remember when I got the call, it was the first call I ever got. Me and my wife were going to purchase a car for me so I could have like a thing to go back and forth to college. And, somebody called me, and it was the first time I'd ever gotten that call. And like the way they spoke, it just, I just started like screaming and crying on like the side of, driving on the side of the road. And we had to pull over. Me and my wife just like sat on the side of the road and just cried. And then like we put it back together, and the kids were in the back, and we went and bought this car. And, that was the first time, and it's not the last time. And now it's gotten to a point now to where like I could tell when somebody calls, like what they're going to say. Like I can feel it. I can always feel it like in my stomach. Like I'll even like look at my phone. I don't want to swear, but I'll be like, okay. Like it'll be like a name that comes across my phone with like the time and the day. I'll just be like, oh, it's not good.
Yeah.
And then I have to take it. And I'm never wrong. I'm honestly never wrong on that. And I wish I was, but I just noticed that like we're slowly but surely, we're all losing this fight. And so like when COVID happened, I've done things before as like creative writing projects, or like my friend TM actually had suggested I start doing more writing. And he had told me in like 2014, he's like, hey, submit some stuff. He's like, I think the Times will read it. And I was like, whatever. And he's like, do it. And that's the secret to life. That's the secret to anything. It's just submit. And guess what? They took it. Like, and then I became a part of the media. No, like I just submitted something and they read it. And then they were like, do you have any more? And I submitted again and they took it. And, I found that writing's a real creative outlet for me. It's cathartic. It helps me process and all these things. And so I started like looking at all these Instagram pages that have like people with cardboard signs and stuff. And I was like, that's funny. And, because it's digital and it's just the side of a piece of cardboard. And
yeah,
I was like, I remember there was like one with a dog. There was a person did CrossFit. There's the dude. There's a dudette. There's like every like genre of person.
Yeah.
Or tribe.
Dude with a sign, I think, was probably like the biggest one out there, right?
Yeah. But that's a media company. So it's not like me. Me is just
not
me.
Really you standing out there with the sign.
Yeah. Yeah. Like the name of the company is a profanity, so I don't want to say it in your podcast, but like it's a real David and Goliath situation to compare the two, because like they're the people that control the internet, not control the internet. They like set trends, you know what I mean? And I'm just like, is it funny? Like, that's just me. And they're not funny. So I started doing it. And the first one I ever did was like drink water, take Motrin, drink water and change your socks was the first sign I ever did. And the young lady that cuts my hair, I was like, I have this idea. And she's like, that's funny. And I was like, all right, we're done cut my hair. When you do this, she's like, yeah, sure. So she took a picture of me outside of the salon. And like, that was it. March of 2020. Yeah. Cause they hadn't done like the official like closing yet.
Yep.
And then it's funny to look back on it now. To like look at them, it's just me standing around outside of my old house, and my wife taking pictures of me or my children. And like what it's evolved to now. Now it's just me standing on the side of the road.
So, one of the things I love, and again, I read a little bit about kind of the methodology behind Veteran with a Sign, and the signs are funny, and especially funny if you're part of the military community, because there's a lot of the things that you kind of have to understand military humor, but they're hilarious. But I love that you're in your green PT shirt and and you do that purposefully, right? Like,
yes,
you're not changing your outfit. It's just like you've got the same outfit on, because it's not about you, it's about the sign you're holding, right?
It's to remove changes, unless I want you to see the changes.
Yeah. And you have a friend that started helping you with that. And you talk a lot about all of these Instagram pages, and I have a love-hate relationship with social media.
No, I hate it.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think the hate more outweighs the love, but there are circumstances where, again, you take your page, Veteran with a Sign, your cardboard signs with 5 or less words on them, for the most part, can teach you so much about military culture.
I'm trying.
Well, I mean, you're doing it. I see it, I certainly see that in the output. So, I give you an A+ for that. And you think about just the way our society is right now. And it's a problem.
Super understanding.
Well, of course. Yeah. And also
everyone doesn't overreact. We all take time to measure our words.
Yeah. And we all have really, I think, in large part, lost the ability to, you talk about your friend at the New York Times.
Mm-hmm.
I'm familiar with his name. You've put a couple pieces in the New York Times.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be, I remember my dad's had a couple of great pieces that he's written. He's a retired
Mm-hmm.
colonel in the Marine Corps, and, you know, in the Wall Street Journal, Business Insider. And it used to be that he would write these pieces and we would track the comments on wallstreetjournal.com. You could go on and it was like it was amazing that people sat down and for 5 to 7 minutes read this long form content, you know.
Those were the days.
Yeah. And that is largely like, he's had pieces and he's like, how many comments? And I'm like, Dad, there's like 2 comments. Like people don't absorb the news in the same way. He still walks around with his Wall Street Journal under his arm every day, so he doesn't get it.
Well, he's definitely a colonel. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yes.
Yeah.
But people have lost the ability to absorb. And so you almost have to tap into like, okay, we understand now how people are absorbing content, and you have to find a way to crack that. I think you've done that. Like you've succeeded in cracking that code for the dumbing down of America, I guess, for the better lack of a word, because like they're not going to read the long form op-ed, but they're going to read your post with a sign, you know, and that's a compliment to you. That's a compliment.
What I heard is I'm making America dumber. So.
No, you're not making America dumber. No. America is dumber, and you have learned how to infiltrate that dumbness by giving them what they need to consume.
So thank you. I would make America smart again, might be my next sign. So there's a writing exercise called the 6-word story. I can't remember who came up with it, but that's basically the concept that I try to input into what I'm doing, which is just the internet. The internet used to be like fun is the best way I can think to describe it. Like when it first started, there was like MySpace and Facebook. You had to have a college email, and there weren't rules. There were no rules. I mean, I don't know if that's good or bad because of like all the stuff I saw at like an age I probably shouldn't have, but the shift of like controlling.
I mean, you used to have a profile song on MySpace. Like those were.
Yeah, mine was Steve Miller Band. What's that? Some Call Me the Gangster of Love, whatever that song is.
Oh, okay. Mine was Gwen Stefani, Sweet Escape. And every time I hear that, I think of my MySpace account. And it's funny because MySpace, I set up my MySpace account when my brother was on his first deployment to Iraq. And I'm like, Travis, I got to set you up a MySpace. And he's like, don't you dare. Because I was like, I'll set it up for you. He's like, if you freaking set me up one of those, like, do not even go there. And I look back, like that was 15 years ago. And, you know, my brother died and he had no social media presence at all. You know, it was like the next year, that was 2000.
Quadrupled.
Yeah. And so it's wild just to see that change. For sure.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of stuff, there's like stuff attributed to that in particular, and it's crazy to think about. But I think one of the biggest game changers was Wi-Fi. Like people like really don't look at it that way. But like I remember like places having Wi-Fi was a big deal. Remember internet cafes? That was a thing. It's still that way in some parts of the world, a lot of parts of the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, the internet used to be like the Wild West. Now it's very segmented and it has lanes to it. And I don't know if it's good or bad. It either needs to have very clear rules, or no rules at all, right? It can't be it because having implied stuff, it doesn't seem to work, right? Like in America, we do have freedom of speech, and it's incredible. But a friend of mine once said, we have freedom of speech. We don't have freedom of consequences. They're not the same thing. You can say whatever you want. It doesn't mean that it won't get you in trouble or there won't be consequences for it. And so trying to be as, unpolitical as possible, as brief as possible, as concise as possible, but as direct as possible. I've been trying to experiment with that thought process. And, early on I had a friend who I had served with who helped me do a lot of stuff from the very beginning, and it's a lot of fun. And he had to move on to go work on other stuff. And, for a long time, it was really hard to kind of crack the code. Like the first, March, April, first 2 months were brutal, brutal. I'd never had so many strangers make comments about my body or my attire ever. Um, uh, it was just it's all dudes too. It's all dudes, like, either pre or post divorce type of energy of like, this guy's an idiot. Why's he dressed like this? Blake 1, 2, 3, and then Gavin 4, 5, 6. Yeah, brother, he's an idiot. And then Steve. They'll have really vanilla names. Steve are like, who does he think he is wearing that shirt? If I were to find him, I'd show him America. Like, it's just, I'm pretty sure it's all just one guy being like, yeah. But again, the focus on my attire was brutal. But like you said, it was just it's all very specific because the outfit is my gym outfit and has been and will be till the day I die.
Right.
Like when I got out, I had like 20 green shirts and a bunch of black shorts. And I was like, okay, I'll do that. Like, I'll do that. I'll work out in it. And then every year I buy another pack of shirts for 3 of them for like $20 and we're good to go. Like there's no thought to it. And then it was like, okay, I'll turn my hat around and, put sunglasses on, really reduce who I am. And it got to a point to where I wasn't sure if I wanted to continue it for a long time. And so I had one more post I wanted to do. And I was, because you don't do things for likes or comments. You can't chase that because it won't work. But like the tone, what am I trying to think of? The overall average was down is the best way to say it. And I kept looking into stuff. And then finally I was just like, okay, let's, put this post up about Captain Crozier, the captain of the ship. And he got relieved because the president, I believe, I don't want to get in trouble. They're like, do you have COVID on the ship? And he's like, yeah, we do. And they're like, are you sure? And he's like, we have so much COVID. Like he kept saying it and he got in trouble for it because he didn't like hide the fact that the sailors on his ship were sick and he was relieved of his command. And most people outside of the military don't really understand like how drastically unprecedented and unusual that is because it's someone being relieved of command during a wartime of basically a base is a big deal.
Yeah.
And so I put up a sign that said, bring back Captain Crozier. And I was just like, I'll just check it later. And I wasn't on my phone. I don't have notifications on my phone except for like 3 things. I've done this since 2012. I went to this class and this guy taught me this method of like whatever, and I really aspired to it. So I have no idea if the thing's doing well or not. And I also don't believe it's good to have those things on, but that's a whole other conversation. So anyways, but I like opened up my phone. I remember I opened up my phone and I was just like, whoa. Like it just took off, just straight through the roof. Like, and it was just rolling. Every time I refreshed it, it was maxed out on comments and likes and maxed out on comments and likes. And here's the craziest part. Steve and Mark and all those guys, like 24 hours were like, what a dumb guy. Or have now been like, right on, brother, spread the word.
Like 1, 2, 3 was liking your content now.
Yeah. Oh man, I've loved this guy since forever. Like, it was weird. Because when there's no comments, you see that like people took a lot of time. His tattoos are dumb, but like it was just, and then it literally pivoted. And since then, it's just been trying to like guide it along the ways, like create a community that I feel is good. Vet resources and organizations that I feel are really doing things to help the veteran community and holding the veteran military community to a higher standard in general. Like everyone's like, the VA is bad. I'm sorry, that's my dumb veteran voice.
I like it.
Well, it's accurate. Nobody's ever like, no, that's inaccurate. Like, man, the VA is just trying to kill all of us. No, bro, they're not. Like, It's healthcare. It's complicated. I've worked in the industry. I understand this. You showed up an hour and a half late to your appointment. They don't have to see you. They work for me. I'm a taxpayer. Dude, come on. Like, what are you doing to make it better?
Yeah, I mean, listen, there is, and we won't get into it, but there is certainly that fine line between entitlement.
I can get into it.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
fine.
yeah. I mean, it's just, I think again, um, when we started our nonprofit, we were, and I take no credit. My mom started the Travis Manning Foundation, but very much by design, it was like, we're not paying for heating bills. We're not paying mortgages. We're not giving checks out. Like, we are not going to be that type of veteran service organization. Now, there are certainly extreme cases that we need to address, but we were going to be the veteran service organization that showcased the strength, the resilience of our veteran community, that showed them in a place as civic assets, where they were out there and they were serving. They weren't asking for that handout, right? They were putting that handout to others. And I think that has waned. I think I'm thinking like 2000.
There was an influx of cash like everywhere.
Yeah, well, there was a time probably around like 2015-ish where I think it was just this overwhelming cycle of putting veterans in and showing veterans in like the worst case scenario, right? And so this veteran is broken narrative, and which really stigmatized the community. And I think now we're trying to like climb our way out of it. Yeah.
I think it's stained because it's like a guy like me, like looking at the thing and it's just like, in the arms of the angels. And I'm just like, veterans. Like, it's just stuff like that. I remember I even found an organization once. It was just off the rails. And they're like, hey, do you like Segways? And I was like, yeah. And like, do you want one? We give Segways to veterans. And I was like, what for? And they're like, that's just what we do. And I was like, no, start over. Like,
yeah.
Start over.
They probably raised a lot of money giving Segways to veterans because their message was like, we need veterans, a lot of them have trouble walking and, they've been fighting in wars and we just want to like, they probably had some slogan, like, give veterans a break off their feet, something like that. Like, donate.
So it's not in Afghanistan? Segways.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, you need a Segway.
And there are circumstances like I remember when the government shut down, there was like the GI Bill wasn't covering tuition, and like there was organizations that helped me and all the veterans at my school. There are these things that happen where like the worst case scenario can happen, but in general, the shaping, the framing, the branding, whatever you want to call, has been that there is a certain sense of entitlement to being a veteran. And that's just not the case, right? Like, you're missing the point. Like, the point is, like, you got to be a part of something that's so great and so big. It's the highest call and duty and honor to serve your country. It's really cool. And on top of that, you're part of the nation's first ever all volunteer fighting force. That's incredible. No draft, no nothing. We weren't farmers like working in and we got conscripted, none of that. You said, I want to serve my country. And there are opportunities that are available to you. There was no way I was going to college outside of it, and it's changed. My family's trajectory has changed, yours and so many others because of multiple different factors involved. But like, I've never thought like I was entitled to something. The only thing I know that I have for sure that other people don't have when they're in some form of service is that I have like a profound understanding of the human experience.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think there's any other way to get it than through service. And I'm not talking about just military service. Like, I'm talking about like working at a nonprofit, volunteering with groups like the Travis Manning Foundation, whatever it is. Like, you will like come back and be like, whoa, I don't really have problems. Like, there are real problems. And you find and you learn like so many different things about you, your community. And I just want to hold us to a higher standard. Like, veterans on the internet at large are not the best. So like, if I can make fun of myself and maybe a few Navy SEALs, it's okay. They'll be fine. They'll write a book about it. But that we can actually learn something from it. And what's funny is like, I remember I I can't remember what it was. Oh, I said something like, if I, what was it? Wearing gaiters doesn't make you a Navy SEAL, but writing a book does. Like the gaiters
Yeah,
eyeglasses. And
sure.
Jocko himself like commented on it. And it was just like, I got this like clean pass from everyone to be like, yeah, it's okay. It's
It's okay.
okay.
What did he comment?
I think he wrote good.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. But
I'm
like, I
actually,
also make fun of myself. I
yeah.
also make fun of myself. Just that's the thing, right? It's just like, it's okay, because that's where we find the stuff. Because if I'm doing these things and doing these jokes to bring you into like the community, it's because I want to give you the message of, I want you to get help. I want you to take care of yourself, and I want you to be better,
Yeah.
and whatever that means.
Yeah, well, I think you've been able to do that. And again, we're I think as a society, we're trying to destigmatize, mental health and talking about it and being open about it. But I think there's the idea of, destigmatizing mental health from, a national level. And then there's
Mm-hmm.
also the microcosm of the military, because that's even harder, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and we understand that that's even harder. It's one thing for, I think for any man to say they're struggling mentally is a challenge, but somebody who served in uniform, listen, I talk about it a lot, and my dad is in a much different place now. But when I was growing up and I would talk about, like, if I was dealing with like anxiety, I mean, typical teenage things, I think. But like, I look back of like, hey, there were times during my teenage years though where I was kind of struggling a little bit. And
Mm-hmm.
we weren't calling it like mental health, but I remember saying, I don't know, I don't want to go to school today. I'm not feeling good. And I was
Mm-hmm.
talking like about my feelings, right?
Yeah.
And that was not something that we did terribly well in my family. And my dad said to me, like, well, you should just go for a run. And like that was his way. Anytime that I would say, after my brother died, after my mom died, and I was diagnosed with PTSD, my dad kept telling me, you're not running enough. You got to go for a run.
Mm-hmm.
And now I understand, and I've talked to him about it, and I talk about it a lot. Like, I understand what he meant by that adage of go for a run, because physical health can have a transformative place
Mm-hmm.
on your mental health, but it's more than that, right? It's more than
Mm-hmm.
go for a run. And so I think a lot of times our service members are programmed to kind of have that same mentality of like, you got to just tough it out,
Mm-hmm.
lift bigger weights or run further, and you work that out of your body.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's something as a society we've struggled with for a long time, especially in the military community, because there was, and I don't know, I hope it's changed, but if you told people we didn't feel good and you were made non-deployable in
Right.
2007 to 2015, you would have much rather been shot on the spot
Right.
than have to tell your company like, hey, I don't feel good.
Yeah.
Like, because there were dudes that did it on both my deployments, and like all I can remember thinking is like, they suck. I'm trying to be as nice as I can here, but like I didn't understand what they were. I mean, I felt the same thing too. Like we're all feeling it, but like the betrayal I felt at that time because they were abandoning us, and that was I was justified in having that feeling the same way they were justified in feeling the way they felt, and it's just the triangle of overall health is the mental, spiritual, and physical. And if without one, the whole thing collapses. And it's something I'm always working on myself, like especially this time of year, Veterans Day is coming up, Marine birthday's coming up. I can feel stuff starting to rise. And you might need to edit this. Do y'all have a stance on psychedelics as
We
the
have what? A
a
stance?
stance?
Well, no, we
Because I did a thing through Vet Solutions with
yeah,
Marcus
tell me about
Capone.
it. I'm like super interested in this. So yeah.
Okay. Okay. Back to one. Um, okay, so last year, I was in this very specific place, which is that I had a job I wanted, I had opportunities I wanted, I had all these things, and I was just flat out, without question, unhappy.
Mm.
There's no other way to describe it.
Wow.
And I reached out to one of the owners of Black Rifle. He did a podcast, Jared Taylor. He talked about doing psychedelics through this organization called Vet Solutions with Marcus and Amber Capone, amazing people. And he's like, I was like, what is this about? And he's like, you'll find out in a month. And I was literally like mowing my yard, and I was like, okay. And I just like hung up the phone, like whatever. And then like a month later, my friend Derek called me, and he's like, hey, you're on this trip. You know? I remember he's like, do you have a passport, or are you still a child? And I was just like, yeah, I've got a passport. And so I went down there, and I was able to do this treatment. And without question, it is one of the most intense, life-changing, altering experiences I've ever had. But like ever. It's about a year. Yeah, it's about a year ago now. So,
but it worked.
Yeah, it was like combining like a decade of therapy into a weekend in Mexico. It's crazy though. Yeah. It's crazy. Like the first day.
Go ahead.
So the first day we did this thing called Ibogaine, and it's a psychedelic that's used for opioid cessation. So this drug is so strong it like cures you of all addictions, is what they say. I'm like, all right, whatever. Yeah, we'll see. We do the ceremony. We take it.
You drink it in a tea? Is it a tea?
This was actually, so this one, that's a ayahuasca.
Oh,
this is a pill. It's just a pill. And they like hooked me up to an IV, hooked me up to an EKG. And we had a nurse and a cardiologist. And I'm in this Airbnb 45 minutes outside of San Diego in Mexico. Oh my God. And so it's me, like some of my friends, like Derek. I remember Derek's like upstairs, and he's like, well, I better take this off. And he's a single leg amputee. He took his leg off, and I was like, oh, this is going to be serious. And so we laid down, and then for like 12 hours, it was the most purging, horrible experience I'd ever had in my entire life to that point. Oh, like what it showed
when it kicked in.
I mean, you've ran marathons, right?
I have.
That last mile, quarter, 3/4, half mile, like as you feel it, like, and like you feel like everything coming out of you, but that moment afterwards, that's the only thing I can probably compare it to. It's just like you feel wrung out, which is what happens. This thing this drug attacks all parts of your brain and hits the part that does addiction and all this stuff, and it just cleans it all out.
So were you lying in a bed for 12 hours?
I was on a bed, yeah, like at night, awake until I fell asleep, yeah, for like 6 hours. It was wild. I mean,
I'm not gonna lie, like I'm having anxiety thinking about your experience right now.
Well, so here's the thing. The whole time you're like, am I doing it right?
Yeah.
And then I was like, I don't know if I'm doing it right. And then just felt like somebody pushed my head in the darkness. And off in the distance, I can see this little square. And the square is a picture of my wife and my 2 daughters. And it's like unclear and it's a little fuzzy, but I can tell what it is. And I can see it. And I can feel something. I can feel like how great that picture is. Like everything about it makes me feel happy. But to the right and left of it, there's these moments that look like on my camera phone, just going like on my iPhone, just scrolling through, and I'm just like, oh, okay. But as they go into the darkness, if they're bad, I purge it, which is you release, they say it's the physical manifestation of trauma. And then it you like wake up and then you purge into a bowl, and that happens for like a night. Wow. Yeah. And then the next morning you wake up, and I walk downstairs, and I was like, I would like an omelet and some pancakes, because like the people that are there helping were like, there's this guy who was on the teams, his name's Punky, and he looks at me, he's like, hey baby brother, how you feel? And I was like, or little brother, and I was like, I'm just really hungry and I'm really tired. So, and then we did that, and then the next day we did DMT, and that was, so like one thing is to like break you down and to start you over, and the other thing is to build you back up. And through the DMT, I was able to have the experiences of reconnecting with like all the things in my life and giving me like clarity on what I need to do moving forward. So
wild.
I'm really kind of truncating the whole experience, but it's kind of like,
yeah,
it's kind of like, I always worry it's like my new personality trait. Like I'm a psychedelic veteran guy, yeah. But like, I
That
don't
should
want to
be
be
one of your
that.
signs. That should be one.
No, I can't. I can't. But all I know is this, is that for hundreds to thousands of years, people have been using these medicines.
Yeah.
In particular, people who had gone to trauma or been through trauma or gone to war to like process. And like, I know one thing for sure, I haven't had any nicotine, any alcohol, nothing. Like, it's just like there's a severed connection with it.
Since then.
Hmm. I mean, even before then, I was pretty clean, but like I've been dipping since I was like 10, because I was a bad kid, and or just really cool. And now I don't do that anymore. And I don't know. I just feel like more clear and more like able to process everything because like all the stuff I had been running from, like stuff in my deployments, my life before then, it was just all kind of there, and it released it and helped me process it through.
It's wild in this like
Yeah.
controlled setting. And you know, so I've like
Yeah, it's very controlled. It's not like Coachella, right?
right. Well, I
So
think
that
about
was, I mean, that was last year. You should do it. That was last year. And like now it's become like mainstream popular, which is crazy.
well, yeah,
Like I had to lie about it. Like people are like, don't tell me we're coming here.
yeah,
Now it's like a whole thing.
because I've been like loosely following it. And I've actually had some friends that have talked about like thinking about doing it. And then I've been following like there's actually some like pretty bipartisan support on
There's a ton of bipartisan support.
yeah.
I believe Texas is decriminalizing psychedelics. There's a ton of stuff for using psychedelics through treatment and trauma and all those
I've
different
seen
things.
Dan Crenshaw has posted about it quite a bit.
Yeah. I mean, without question, it's the single most impactful thing I've done to like, um, not kickstart, to get better
Yeah.
ever. And it's not like everything's not great after that. Like, my car broke down last week. Like things are, you still have to process stuff.
Sure.
But I would say that the biggest thing that I've noticed is that like I cry like a dad in a Disney movie is basically how I cry now. And I've never done that before. Like my kids will like do something, I'll be like, I'm so proud of you. And like before I was just like, that's cool. Yeah. I mean, I still felt the same, but like my connection to them
Yeah.
and everything else just feels much more pure and honest, if that makes sense.
I wonder, you know, and again, now I'm going to go and do a ton more research on this, but I wonder if they've taken people, you know, you said you weren't feeling good, you were in a bad place, but like, I wonder if there are people that were like suicidal that have tried this and
So Marcus Capone himself, who was on the SEAL teams for several, I won't even get it. He was a certified OG team guy out there, hammering, like his name's Cameron Hames, just doing the Lord's work, right? Multiple attempts at suicide, has no longer had any attempts,
because
right?
psychedelics.
Because of this. And so that was when he was like, I want to make this organization work.
Wow.
And so it's something that I'm so interested in. I'm like talking to them about how to like help get this stuff out there. I mean, I've sent people to it who are in that place. I mean, my biggest thing is that like at the time when I decided to like pull the trigger on it, and that's the only expression I think to use, but I was like, there aren't going to be many moments in my life where I'm this available and this connected to stuff like, where I have like all these different things of like, will my work care? No, my work so I can go. Like, do I have time? Do I have like, there's no, I even found myself like towards the end being like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. Like trying to back out of it. And a lot of that is just self-worth stuff. But the thing that pushed me over the edge is like, there's so many reasons why I should go that I can't not go. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because for so long, I've never thought I was worth it. And I think that's really what all mental health starts at, right? If you like pull apart the layers, and they're all so complex, and I can't even begin to understand different things people are going through. But I think that the level one is that we don't feel worth it.
Yeah.
And what is it that makes you feel that way? Social anxiety, depression, whatever it is. You don't feel worth it. You don't feel like you're good enough or worthy enough. And I just didn't feel happy. And I was like, I want this to go away. I want this to like be removed from me.
Yeah. It's
Does that
amazing.
make sense?
Yeah. It's Amazing.
feel like I've really rambled and I'm
No,
slightly embarrassed, but
I'm actually so glad that we had that conversation. Yeah, and what I love most is that you have this like online persona, right? Like, and you say like, it was just last year that you weren't feeling good. It's not like, hey, it was like 10 years ago. Like it was last year. Like
it was, yeah. So it was last year. And like, I had and have everything I want.
right,
Like
right.
life's pretty cool. There's a tomahawk in my office that somebody sent me. And that's just stuff that shows up at my house. It's pretty cool.
Right.
Right. I work at a coffee company that's run by veterans. It just went public. I can call all the owners on the phone. Like there's like the ability for me to do things or set things up for friends of mine or opportunities or like, you know, it's unprecedented.
Yeah.
It's wild. And like I was like, I don't like it. Like it just felt like this. Like it felt like I was crammed up. And what it was I had removed everything. I removed a normal job. I removed my connection to like society in that way. And I had like all this freedom. And what I found was when I had all this freedom, I still wasn't all the way happy.
Yeah.
And what I've learned on the other side of that experience is like, that's what life is. And that's been hard. That's been hard. Like it's been super hard. Just yesterday was is the anniversary of a friend of mine who he didn't make it. That's all there's to it. And I look at how I felt yesterday, and it's like my body knew before my mind did. But like a year ago, I was not as connected to that. Of like, why am I acting this way, or like, what does that mean? And now it's this thing of like me just really trying to unpack what mental health means in my life and in my family's life. And as a society, like I really just want people to be like, hey, it's okay. Like this is what I did, but there's other stuff, right? Like that's just a baseline.
Sure.
But the everyday maintenance is going for a run, is working out, is talking to people. It's like my favorite thing to do right now is to go to Costco on Friday because a bunch of these like older veterans meet there. And like I just buy a bunch of hot dogs and I'm just like, hey, you want a hot dog?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, And a lot of these gentlemen, they're on fixed incomes, and I try to just like not make a big deal out of it, obviously, but I'm like, hey, you want a hot dog? And like just kind of spend some time with them, spend some time with them. It does so much for me. And just remembering of like, wow, these people really sacrificed so much to get here. And like, it's just cool to see that. Man, like that's what I'm trying to do now is be more like that, and support my wife and my children the best I can.
I love it. Zach, we obviously, wow, what a kind of,
if not me, then who?
Right. What an awesome roller coaster of, and
that's one way.
Yeah, but I mean, I think, and I talk about it a lot too. I always say, like, I talk about some of the shit that I've been through, and but I also am like, listen, it's not like, oh, I made it through. It's smooth sailing from here. Like I struggled, and I'm going to struggle again, and so will you. So
you posted something the other day of like, what was it? I went for a run today and started crying, thinking about my brother. Grief has no expiration date. And I literally, can I swear? Can you swear?
You can swear.
Yeah, you're from Philly. So like, I just looked at my phone and I just went, damn. I was like, damn.
That was your swear?
Like, well, fuck shit. I don't know, whatever. Like, you're still a lady. I'm still a Southern gentleman. Okay.
We just lost our clean rating on this podcast, but that's okay. But
you did it before then?
No, we had
the record show.
Yeah.
But like it hit a depth within me of like, my first thought was like, that's so beautiful. And my second thought was like, that's probably the most accurate thing I've ever heard. Like, and that was part of the reason, like I went through the stuff with, going through vet solutions is like, that's how I had to learn that. Your path to learning that was different is that there is no expiration date, but that's part of it.
Yeah.
But until then, you're like, well, I feel better. Like, will things get better? And people are like, yeah, you will. But like, that's the thing, is like the better is learning how to move through that and with that.
Yep. Well, it was funny because I posted that in my story, and again, sometimes I have like, oh, I'm going to post about this day. That was like, I literally just got up and went for a run, and I was feeling really good because I was running really fast. I was like, oh, okay. And
Yeah.
oh, I just did 3. I'm going to run 4. And I've got my gym is all my brother's stuff. It's all his Naval Academy wrestling posters, pictures of him. I mean, it's all his crap in there. It's his weight bench, all of it. And I just looked up at a picture of him when I finished, and I just started crying, and I posted that. And like my husband came up, and at this point, it's a few hours later, I'm posting a reel about the Army Navy game and get your ticket to our tailgate. And I'm fine. Like I was perfectly fine at that point. And he's like, babe, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, why? He's like, I just saw your story. He's like, you were crying this morning? And I'm like, oh yeah. I'm like, but I'm fine now. Like I got that, and I said it was a cathartic cry. I said it wasn't like, it was a cathartic cry for me. But yeah, it's working it through every day. Yeah. Well, okay. So to wrap this,
that's what a resilient life is.
That's what, yeah. So, you talk about like all of these things, all of these trials that you've been through in kind of your path. Is there something that you look towards every day that helps you define resilience, that helps you live a resilient life? Like, what does that mean to you?
When I think about all the people that aren't here, who either died in war or when we came back, I do feel a certain amount of responsibility to not be successful, but to live a life of like fulfilled life.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I should or shouldn't, but it's just where I'm at. And that's when I think about like living a life resilient, like I really do. A lot of me is like, I really need to like check the boxes of like, what would they do type thing, or like, I have to make it successful for us. And like us is like my tribe, in the sense of like, and what I really want to do is, if I could do anything, is being like a part of this like movement that like is able to really break the ground of the way we think about mental health in our country. And I think the military's always led to like a lot of like changes, in my opinion. Like they've always been like at the forefront of like equality and different things and like social understandings, because it's a smaller controlled group realistically. And like if it can work in this way, it can work in a larger context, hopefully. And if we can just be like, hey man, it's okay to feel that way. That's all right. Like it's okay to cry. Like that's beautiful. Like you had this moment where you're just like out there, getting it, and you come home, you have this moment, like that's all right. Like that is the way we need to think about it, not like, just punching concrete because you feel a certain way, which is the most marine way of dealing with things. It's just like eating rocks, being like, I'm okay, when you're not. And that's like, I think about being a life resilient is like, whenever I feel tired or whenever I feel disconnected, I'm like, I don't get that. Like my thing's not over yet. My thing's not over yet. I
get it.
My mission is to help people transition beyond the battlefield, because it works two ways. If I'm able to help them, it helps me. So it gives me belief that we can all do it together, and it gives me accountability of being like, yeah, I got to practice what I preach type thing. And, I look at it as like a workout partner type thing. Like if I'm saying, hey, young blood, like, take care of yourself, I got to do it too.
Yeah, totally. And I get it. I mean, again, I say it all the time. Like every day I feel like I have an obligation to live a life worthy of my brother's sacrifice, So yeah, it's just, I love it. I love what you're doing. Veteran with a Sign, follow on Instagram and Facebook. Zach,
Please
thank
do.
you so much for joining us on this episode of The Resilient Life.
The honor and privilege of mine. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much for joining us for another episode. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and share with your friends.